Draft physics video or science or something like that. Continuing with the comments. A little distracted by lots of stuff. So I'll, try to make this, try to stay focused if I can, but we'll see what happens. So I left off with mindless marbles, and he's going to make arguments about Lesage gravity and blah 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 blah. And again, I'm not arguing for Lesage gravity, so um, you don't want to pay attention to that. That's fine. Um, in the sense that it's obviously a modification of the idea of ultra mundane particles. But anyway, as stated, matter is just a pattern moving. It isn't really made of anything but force. But anyway, with regards to Lesage gravity, can you explain how the fact that head-on collisions don't do anything nullifies the raindrop analogy? So the Feynman analogy is if you're running into the rain, more rain will hit you in the front than it'll hit you in behind. And that's true, but as I've pointed out, the key interaction is the interaction with the perpendicular bit. So again, this goes back to a way of understanding the world that you people just don't want to play along with. So the premise would be to first understand that forces move in one dimension at the speed of light. They don't have other dimensions. So a photon of light only exists in the dimension it's moving in. It doesn't have any perpendicular dimensions. That's why it has no mass. It's because it doesn't have any other elements. Now, matter is made of forces moving in all three dimensions. That's why we have mass in all three dimensions. That's why you can physically hit us from any angle, is because our matter has bits moving in those directions to reflect, technically, the impacts, to absorb them and modify, change the direction of them. So as I stated, the key factor is the idea that as you gain acceleration, you change the balance of your matter. So velocity means that you have changed the balance. That means you have more stuff going one way, there's more fish swimming the direction you're moving in, and less fish swimming in the other directions. And that's how you go faster and faster, is getting rid of the fish going the wrong way. Alright, I get that it reduces the drag cool, but it doesn't make it zero. Well, again, it does make it zero if you're eliminating the drag of the perpendicular, the fish going the wrong way. If a body is moving, it still has sometimes moving perpendicular to its motion. So again, that's what you're saying. It depends on how fast it's moving. The point is, if it achieves the speed of light, it won't have any elements moving perpendicular to its motion. Wouldn't those tons be affected by the background tons and you still end up with drag? Well, like I said, you would if there wasn't this compensation, which means to pay for going forward, you have to pay with those other dimensions. That's the conservation. Unless all the tons are directed towards forwards, there will be some drag. No? Well, the point is no. Because as you eliminate, okay, you're just making something, again, I'm just saying, the faster you go, technically, no, analogistically, you're getting thinner. The faster you're moving, you're getting greasier. The faster you're moving, you're getting pointier. However you want to explain that, but I mean the point is you're less likely to create anything called drag because everything that creates it is being eliminated as you're moving faster. What about the idea that some tons are reflected with a line through it? I don't know what that means. Sorry, deflected. It doesn't really matter. In a two-body system. I think everything can be okay. Well, again, the argument I'm making is that not all the tons are the same. So there's two kinds of them, and it matters on what's being thrown at you will decide what happens in a two-body system. So if it's an electron and a proton, the two-body system creates a very strong absence of pressure between the two, and the external pressure pushes them together aggressively. In an Earth-Sun situation, both the bodies have both kinds. They're not just electrons or just protons. They're a mixture of both. So the force, the elimination of pressure, is reduced by some factor, like half or it's some other factor, because the only reflections you get are incidental. That is, a ton leaves a proton from the Earth and hits an electron on the Sun, and then it reflects. But if it hits a proton, then it gets absorbed in the sense that its direction is changed, left, right, up, or down, not forward anymore. So there's a factor that's some percentage of the reflective force would still exist. So it won't be as strong a force when you're dealing with two material bodies, because they're not pure. Like magnets, for example, which are more pure. Okay, as soon as you get to a three-body system, that would ruin the square inverse law. How so? The dynamic of particle gravity, Mach gravity as it's called, works fine with any number of bodies in a system. So any system you create of Mach gravity, where you create force tons that are pushing things together, it will duplicate all of Newton's laws. So there's nothing about a three-body system that wouldn't be just as obedient. We can have two planets on an axis shadowing each other, okay, but if there's less tons between, aren't these less tons deflected perpendicular from the bodies? Yes, by a percentage. So again, you have to recognize that some of the proton force will hit electrons, some of the electron force will hit protons. So some will get reflected, some will get absorbed by a probabilistic ratio. So if there's a third body to the side of one of them, it be attracted even more than usual. How would the Earth, Sun, and Moon move about? I don't understand why you're saying there's a problem, so I guess I can't really understand how to answer your problem, because I don't know how it exists. There's nothing in Einstein's bent space is exactly the same thing as an external force that creates a convergence. It's exactly the same thing. The convergence is just made of an amount of pressure change, and a particle can do that. Again, the only problem with Lesage gravity was the thermodynamic problem. There was no other problem. It worked fine, except when you took it out of solar systems and tried to move something through space. That's when it got messed up. And I fixed that. Alright, so I guess we'll do this guy's comment since it's here. These days, capital for the first sentence, but whatever. These days I was puzzled by the scenario. What happens if just one ton collides with the electron? Depends on what kind of ton it is. As stated, there's two polarizations, just like there's protons and electrons. Those two polarizations, there's a commensurate field energy, has likewise two polarizations. So if an electron is, say the electrons are white and the protons are black, there's a black and a white force. And if it's black on black, then it's a reflection. If it's black on white, then it's a perpendicular change. And the perpendicular change means two directions actually. It means you're converting something that was going this way into going this way, which means in effect you've added force going this way. You've created imbalance going this way because you've converted something going this way. So now you have an imbalance this way in this dimension, and an imbalance in this dimension because you've added something going this way. The other reaction just creates the pure reflection. So one reaction has only the pure reflection part. The other reaction changes the dynamic in two different dimensions. Two dimensions are changed. Okay. So how much energy does it deposit? The Planck minutia, an h-bar amount. Or does it sort of, and again it depends on what you define as energy. Energy isn't, say if I gain velocity, I haven't really gained energy. I've only taken energy that was going other directions and now I'm applying it in a new direction. So yes, I have more energy in the direction I'm moving, but I have less energy in the directions I'm not moving. Alright, let's see. How much energy does it deposit? Or does it sort of primes the electron for the next interaction? Well, frequency is the tipping point argument. So frequency in electrons just has to do with how much energy it takes to move an electron to hit it hard enough to get it out of its orbit. And as I've explained, the electron is pushing, is going to tend to, as you accelerate an electron, it's going to tend to decelerate quickly. And if there's an existing force, that's why it was where it was, is because it liked where it was. It was a more comfortable place. If you're pushing it into an environment that it didn't find comfortable, it's going to end up getting pushed back to where it was. So the pushback force is quicker, okay, than the frequency. Then you won't be able to move the electron. If your frequency is higher than the pushback force, frequency or speed, then you can kick the electron out of its current position and force it to find a new place to live. Yeah, a new quiet place. Next interaction. The electron for the next interaction, only then we'll have, and only then we have the well-known measurable energy transfer of C over lambda. I wouldn't measure energy based on frequency, because as I've pointed out, just like you don't measure how much force you have in one direction, a bullet standing still has force in all three dimensions that are equal. When the bullet's moving, it now has more force in one direction, but has less force in the other two dimensions. So the point is, it really doesn't have more total energy. It's just where the energy is different. It's not proportional dimensionally. So at rest is just at rest mass is the same as your moving mass. It's just that the mass is imbalanced in one dimension more than the others. Okay, I think that's clear enough. Because without a second ton, we clearly can't determine the frequency, hence the energy. Well, clearly you can, because you can measure the thing moving. So what I'm arguing is that, yes, magnetism and gravity are both evidence of tons without frequency moving things. Now, you might say gravity is a weaker force than magnetism, but certainly you're not going to say it's a imperceivable force. We feel it dramatically. It's a real there, and it's happening without a frequency. Those tons don't come at a frequency, but they still affect us. What happens then to the system? The ton cannot simply... That's all. I don't know. It just ends there. I don't know why. There's no more button or anything. There's just, that's where it ends. The ton cannot simply. Alright, Superior Mind types a whole bunch of stuff here, but I don't know if it's actually the way I would say it. I don't know if it's worth reading it all, but no, let's do some of it. In short, any ton that doesn't significantly affect an electron within a band of compatible frequency will simply pass through. Well, that's not true. It won't simply pass through. It'll do exactly what it does. It'll either convert into it'll change into an EMF release and an acceleration forward, or it will reflect, which will also be an acceleration forward. But it doesn't really pass through without any significant effect, without any effect. There is no single ton when they speak of a photon, since they're referring to energy per cycle, ascribed frequency, so it's highly misleading. Well, look, certainly it gets complicated, because you can say, look, there's two things hitting each other, and after the interaction, one goes this way and one goes this way. The reflection is the same as not hitting, and that does create a mind fuck, so to speak. Because you're saying, well then, yeah, you can have as many head-on collisions as you want, and they can't possibly mean anything because there's no value to the reflection. The reflection is the same as a complete miss. Exactly the same universe exists. So in answer to Mindless Marbles guy, that's sort of the point. The drag just can't exist. Doesn't matter how many head-on collisions you have, they can't really mean anything because they're reflections that have no consequence. I mean, the universe is exactly the same whether it happened or it doesn't happen as an impact. If they just pass each other, it's exactly the same as if they hit each other. Anyway, I mean, it's hard to appreciate something as being something that's an actual event as being nothing. Because you say it has to be accounted for, it's an event. But it just can't mean anything. The other thought of interest, read only if interested. Whatever. Detection of knowledgeable radiation is dependent on the observed reaction emission of matter, which may not necessarily tell us how many actual tons there are, some pass, but how many interactions we can detect, and thus we can extract from what we call the frequency. Well, this is where, yeah, I guess well, he says tipping points. So there are thresholds or tipping points, which are residual effects of nucleus properties. I don't know whether it's the nucleus necessarily, but it's the residual effect of the tension that everything exists in, and the fact that the material bits, the electrons and protons, are compelled to go to a place that's more quiet than any other place around them. So the field around them, the next available space on the checkerboard, has to be noisier than the place they're in for them to stay where they are. There has to be something not good about it. Now there could be a safer place 4 checker spaces away that could be quieter than the place they're in now, but they can't really see that through the barrier of the ring they're trapped in. Okay. Alright, so I guess it's probably a very good comment, but yes, I'll move on. It's a very long comment, and I really want to get to the naysayers and the nitpickers. So Gus says, if one ton deflects another ton, they bounce perpendicular. Well, like I said, I've drawn pictures. They're on the website. I mean, I've illustrated the difference between the two polarities, and the fact that yes, when there's opposite, when the quanta is an opposite polarity to the material bit, then you have this perpendicular conversion, and when it's not opposite, then you just have a reflection. Alright, so if gravity is the result of ton soup, whatever, fish soup, yeah, okay, just, I mean, unnecessary, but whatever. Play your game as if that's the smart way to play, is to be trivial. Or whatever, so another or whatever, even though I've drawn it out, spelled it out, and talked about the two different kinds of reactions over and over again, they just keep or whatevering, as if I've left it vague, and I really haven't been that vague. You should expect all particles, including photons, to be extremely unstable. Why? Magnetism is a very strong force. Unstable how? I mean, the low pressure between a proton and an electron, there's nothing unstable about it. Everything goes out the gates. All the horses leave the barn. And the only ones that are still in play are the tiny percentage of random ones coming in from the external world that just happen to come in perpendicularly and end up going out in the direction that you have no pressure. So there's only very slight pressure, and that would be when they get very close to each other. There's a pressure that'll prevent them from being consumed by each other. Anyway, alright, where's the comment? Including for the unstable, as in they'd collapse immediately. Well, first off, the quanta can't collapse. There's no reason to believe they would. So again, what are you basing that on? You're just saying it. So Mach gravity is a real thing. It doesn't create collapsing particles. It doesn't create Earths that break into pieces. So what are you talking about? Why is there some need to make something unstable? You didn't defend that with anything. It's just a straw man. As in, it's not even a straw man because it's a statement. It's an assumed fact that has absolutely no evidence to support it. As in, they'd collapse immediately. There's no evidence that would happen. Where's your proof of that? That's rational, he says. Why? You didn't explain why that's rational. What's it based on? Where's your evidence of something like Mach gravity creating unstable things that fall apart? Where's your evidence of that? But remember, this channel doesn't deal with rational land. Well, again, and you don't deal with evidence land and fact land. You just sit there and make declarations of what the truth is and defend it with nothing but rude, obnoxious shit. It deals with the twilight zone. So again, your statement is unfounded, unevidenced, unreasoned, unexplained. You're just telling me your God is God. There's nothing there to argue. Alright, so Superior Mind says, the conjecture doesn't match the actual logic. Markovian chains, emergent patterns in equilibrium of influence. I don't know. Don't forget, too, that there are polarity exchange mechanisms, and that all constituents of the soup are made of the same thing exchanging direction in at one speed. Well, they're not really the same thing. As pointed out, the forces can't interact with forces. Forces can only hit maybe head on, and so it's nothing. But more importantly, matter is different. So the material bits are the thing that can do the perpendicular thing because it has 3 dimensions. The one-dimensional bits can't interact with each other. The one-dimensional bits can interact with the 3-dimensional bits. And so none of the important interactions can happen force on force. That's why forces don't combine until a material thing shows up to do the math, metaphorically. But as a practice, that's a real phenomenon in science. I mean, that's something all the physicists would agree. Okay, that's the superposition principle. The forces don't combine. Each force affects the material bit independently, and the material bit decides what the solution to the force circumstance is. It does the math and comes up with the product, the addition and subtraction. Alright, are made of the same thing, exchanging direction at one speed. If photons are force at one speed, then how would it collapse? Photons are force at one speed, how would it collapse? It doesn't seem like you understand the theory. Well, he doesn't try to understand, and he's not paying any attention. But again, to make a claim like it's authoritative fact when all you have to change is one circumstance and there's no collapse. I mean, it's like inventing dark matter. That's okay with you. So they fix galaxies by just inventing dark matter, and you find that totally acceptable. I haven't invented something bizarre. All I've stated is that there's an idea called polarization, and because of it, there's two different kinds of reaction that the little tons have. Now, that's hardly dark matter-ish, and yet all of this speculation about how it can't exist that way, it would fall apart. Well, I can say that about the galaxies then. By normal physics, they can't function. It's impossible. Asshole. Oh, this is an awful long pile of crap here from this whatever Dulo Mighty 74. I hate these people, these titles they have. He's wearing some sort of, kind of icon wearing some sort of mask. Alright, no capital again. Misleading or not, the established theory, the math, still applies. What does that even mean? Oh, whether it's wrong or whether they're inaccurate, it doesn't matter. Oh, no, it does matter. Any alternative model must predict the same results. Well, again, all of this argument about what was predicted, when I've pointed out that one of the most famous predictions, that is Einstein's prediction that light is, it would be possible to bend light with gravity, hasn't really been proven still by any volume of evidence, even if the phenomenon we measured has different underlying mechanisms. So I don't know what exactly are you claiming as your predictions. Exactly. Yes, the second ton passes, but still the first has been captured. Nothing can be captured. It can only be exchanged. So that argument's been argued and argued and argued, really. Where does it go? It doesn't. Never mind. It doesn't. It goes. They're all moving the speed of light. They never can do anything else. So all you can do is change their path. You can make them travel more distance by forcing them to go back and forth. But theoretically, they don't really go back and forth. The one that was going this way still goes this way, but we call it a reflection. But it's not really a reflection. They really do kind of go through each other. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's see. Okay, if no other ton arrives at the same time window of the electron to accept, for us to detect the now complete photon, its energy must go somewhere. Well, again, as stated, you're not really collecting energy. You're measuring an imbalance in fields. And so, yes, 2 extra photons going this way, defining a frequency of a photon of light. The thing either moves this way or it releases EMF, okay, magnetism, this way, perpendicularly, or that way, one of the perpendicular directions. That's where it goes. There's no conservation problem. You either create a form of electromagnetism, as Einstein demonstrated, or you create heat. But you'll create something when a photon hits something. You'll create one of those two phenomena. Alright, let's see, where was I? Let's see, its energy must go somewhere. Maybe it eventually emerges from the electron, legacy direction. Again, if the electron is accelerating, then the electron is essentially converting things going this way, right? So the electron's got parts going this way, and this way. And for the electron to move, what has to happen is the stuff going this way and this way, for some period of time, has to stop going this way and that way, and has to go that way. And that's the energy. It takes energy, okay, it's not energy, it takes time for that to happen. You get it? I mean, that's what also creates time dilation, is the fact that to move something going this way and this way, that way, you have to stop it from doing this and this. Shit, for a second. And it has to do this. And that's why the electron's moving much slower than the speed of light. Even though it was hit by something going as fast as the speed of light, it moves very slowly by comparison. Alright. Also, this process of non-tipping interactions, I don't know what that means, should have a measurable consequence. Imagining the tons were part of a mono-something stream, monochromatic stream, that's still at a frequency. Same distance between the tons. The interaction left a hole. And so if the previous and the next tons happen to interact with some other target, they would appear as a photon with half the energy. We are ignoring the tipping point argument, which is this has to happen very fast, or the electron goes right back to where it was, and you lose any ability to either excrete the electron or to change the direction in which the light is traveling. But one of those two things is likely to happen. I mean, it's like lightning. You create ions that only exist for a very short period of time, and then those negative ions go back to being regular atoms again. And that's the flash of light. So the current moved, and the flash of light happens after. It's on the trip back. But anyway, half the energy, let's see. So the previous and the next tons happen to interact with the same target, they would appear as a photon with half the energy. And if the missing tons were 2, 1/3 of the energy, and so on. Well, again, you're just ignoring the fact that what we understand about these things is that they're all frequency sensitive. So you can't just make up the frequency some other way. You can only make it the way the photons do it, which is having them move in exactly the same trajectory and hit the same electron. So you're kind of ignoring that. Now, radio waves probably aren't dependent on hitting the same electron because there's such a huge volume of them. So if you have a high enough volume, okay, then you can vibrate electrons. But those are vibrating electrons, not necessarily moving electrons, except in the conductor. But anyway, you're just ignoring the fact that the form of the reaction is dependent on the sensitivity to the different frequencies. Different frequencies will produce different effects on the electron. Experimentally, we should see a spectrum of subharmonics with F0n being neutral. Well, again, There's no harmonics. It's either a perpendicular release or it's an electron gets moved. But that's it. There's no harmonics involved here. There's no bouncing back and forth inside of something. There's no residual echo. Maybe we perceive non-tipping interactions as gravity. No. Well, obviously, yes. Obviously, gravity is quanta interactions that aren't at a frequency. It's not that they're non-tipping, they're not at a frequency. But yes, certainly they're, yes. I just wouldn't phrase it that way. Maybe we perceive non-tipping interactions as gravity. I wouldn't say it that way, but yes, that's exactly what gravity is. It's exactly the same stuff as a photon. It just isn't at a frequency the electron is sensitive to. Alright, a note here. In Gary's model, photons are a collection of 2 or more tons, but still he hasn't derived the quantity Fleck. I don't know what that means, but yeah, I have. I just go back to Planck's constant. Call it a 1. It just doesn't matter. The 1, they're all exactly the same. The tons have exactly the same speed and exactly whatever you want to call a mass. They're exactly the same thing. Every single one of them. And the difference is one affects protons in a certain way and one affects electrons in a certain way. But it's always the same. Alright. Starting simple, I choose to assume the minimum of 2 tons per photon. Well, again, see, the word photon is getting broken here because obviously they call things they call things that are invisible photons. And you're trying to talk mainly about visible tons. But anyway, in any case, at least one previous ton to set the frame. I don't know what that means. Regarding H, oh shit. It's a fact that getting lower and lower with total energy, doing this by decreasing the photon rate or the integration time, at a certain point we measure something fixed or nothing at all. Well, the point would be is that the ton itself, say if they were bowling balls, they have a certain thickness. And so even if you put 2 bowling balls next to each other, you have a certain Planck distance that you can never undo. That's the minimum. The minimum is the distance of the bowling balls. The thickness of them. The thickness, the width of the length of the bullets. You can have bullets end to end, perhaps legally, but you'd still have a length because the bullets have a length. Alright. Doing this by decreasing the rate of the integration time. At a certain point we measure something fixed or nothing at all. And this is where the well-established quantization emerges. Well, it's well established as a foundational conservational theory, but frankly when you listen to them talk about it, they don't live up to that quantization. If it was so dependent on the integration time, experimentally we should measure a continuum, which we don't. Well, again, I don't think that. So again, you're making these statements as if you have some evidence that there's echoes and that there's harmonics and that there's vibrations and all of this other crap, and there aren't. An EMF leaves. Something leaves perpendicular. It doesn't stay inside the electron. All that's changed for the electron, it doesn't gain a ton. Again, anything that's moving hasn't gained tons. It's converted one's going the wrong way for one's going the right way. It's exchanged their identity. So all of that is moot. Let's see. About the nice ton shower image. I don't know what that means. Another highly speculative idea I'm having fun with is a cosmological one. At the beginning, tons were all compacted. No ton coming from somewhere far. The pressure was at a maximum. Space was expanding fast. Well, I don't want to do this space is expanding bullshit. Sorry, no sale. The nothing was coming for us. No, it's just a pile of shit. Expanding space. Anyway, Gus, Superior Mind, shithead, can you just say the word Markov chain and expect me to take you seriously? What the fuck does Markov process have to do with anything I said? Nothing. Whatever. Then Gus again. Polarity exchange mechanism, that's made up bullshit. So, yes, so whatever you explain as an alternative theory, they can just say that's made up bullshit. Well, I can say bent space is made up bullshit. Completely made up bullshit. Relativity is made up bullshit. So, you know, there's no... the only thing that can be argued here is what theory is extraordinary and what theory is incredibly ordinary in terms of the function, which provides a simple explanation of how the thing works, and which provides no explanation of any mechanism whatsoever. I mean, understanding a perpendicular interaction, a crash between two things, and realizing that this thing goes this way and this thing goes that way. So if it's a purple car, the purple car doesn't go straight, the purple car goes to the left or right, or forward or back, and the red car is the red car doesn't go the way it was going, it now takes a new direction. Now, is that too complicated for you? Asshole. Anyway. There's no such thing as polarity exchange mechanism, says you. So again, I say there's no such thing as bent space. I say there's no such thing as bent time. I say there's just absolute silly ideas. You're fields of nothing. You explain nothing. You provide nothing as an illustration of anything. You're well-defined photons that nobody can draw a picture of. Fuck you. So maybe I ought to call you a simple-minded idiot who's been caught lying. Well, you're the one caught being a preposterous, duplicitous hypocrite to sit there and point out that you can't understand red car goes left and purple car goes straight, but you do understand bent space. Yeah, sure you do. The nothing tells the something what to do. That makes coherent, logical sense to you, fucking cunt. Anyway. Should I do that? Is this how you want the conversation to go? Just keep it up. No, you're the fucker who's ruined any hope of a conversation. You rude, obnoxious hunk of steaming shit. Okay, Superior Mind. No such thing as a polarity exchange mechanism. Oh, I see you're struggling. Let me help you with this one. Baby steps. Is there such a thing as polarity? Yes. Okay. Nod then. Can polarity be modified? Yes. Okay. So, do things that are modified require a mechanism? Obviously, yes. Yeah. All right. So then Mindless has to chip in. So he says, Superior Mind, actually, that brings up a good question, I think. Well, I'm sure I'm not going to think so. If you can have two tons moving in a row, constituting a photon, why wouldn't they get lost in the soup? Because forces don't interact with forces. You're the ones that have that problem with your gravity affecting photons. Because I can ask you the simple question, how is it realistic that a photon travels 15 billion years through intensely variable gravity fields constantly, and yet it stays coherent to what it was when to its origin? That's a high expectation. All the evidence of all forces that have ever been directly experimentally dealt with indicates forces do not interact with forces. All it takes is for one background ton of a different polarity to hit one of the two tons, and then the photon is ruined. No. No, question mark. No, as pointed out, matter functions different than the forces. There's two fucking things, idiot. Jerk. How many times does this has to be said? There's the quanta, and then there's the matter bits. The matter bits are the only thing that can do the perpendicular trick. No other bit can do that, because none of the other bits have quantity in 3 dimensions. The matter bit has stuff in all 3 dimensions. That's what makes it a matter bit. Frankly, it can be 2 dimensions. I mean, electrons could just be 2-dimensional. That is, some electrons will always, they'll always excrete the force up and down, and the other electron will do it left and right, you know, going this way, say. So they could just be 2-dimensional. So don't quote me. The matter bits could be 2-dimensional bits. But obviously, if you mix protons and electrons, let's say they worked on 2 different dimensions. Say the proton was doing this plus this, and the electron was doing this plus this. You can see that when you add them up, you have something in all 3 dimensions. But shit, there's a distinction between matter and not matter. The force and the matter. 2 different things. Force can't affect a force. Forces only affect matter. Alright, so this Hitman, so yeah, I should have known from his name, he's an idiot. Hitman Notary. Okay. So, you know, he's been making a lot of comments on my main Vendom videos, you know, supportive and all that shit, but, you know, he's a complete motherfucking asshole. It's always so disappointing, you know, when people just, you know, just saying, how could you even, you know, what is your game? Because you obviously couldn't understand anything about my, my philosophy and be this fucking stupid. So anyway, I blocked him on the M&M channel because he's too colossally fucking psychotically stupid. This is a psychotically stupid comment. Alright, at about 3.50, you say that it's easier to push something via a rocket 1,000 miles away from the Earth's surface. No, rockets don't work in space. I mean, how could anybody say something that stupid first, and then say it with any kind of arrogance? It's just so fucking stupid. Gary, learn it, know it, and now you are smarter for it. So this is the kind of the patronizing, you dumb fuck. I mean, the fungus under my big toenail is smarter than you piece of shit. I like your channel. I don't give a fuck. I hate your guts because you're an arrogant retard. I mean, retard is bad enough, but arrogant retard, unacceptable. But you lack that understanding, and it makes you sound stupid. No, you sound insane, retard. I mean, to make an argument like rockets don't work in space means you must be some kind of truther kook who didn't see the lunar module take off from the moon's surface. No atmosphere there, right? Butt fucker. Alright, so I just said fuck you and fuck off. Instead of fucking off as he should, he has to make another comment. Let's see. Gary, saying fuck off and fuck you won't change the fact. What fact? You're an idiot, a retard, a fool. Deal with it. It's easier to feed on weaker things. I don't even know what that means, weirdo. So then James McGinn says, rockets work in space, dumbass. Yeah. And then the stupid idiot says, no they don't. Oh yeah, well that's a great counter argument. Alright, so a vertically climbing rocket loses the ability to push against anything. It doesn't have to push against anything. The force of expansion is essentially a push against the stuff going the other way. If I take something this big and I expand it to this big, there's force going in both directions. That's why the rocket has those little cups. You know why they're cupped? You know, the engine of the rocket. You know why it's cupped? Because the expansion happens inside the cup. You see? And as the expansion happens inside the cup, it's forced out of the cup because there's less room at the bottom of the cup than there is at the top of the cup. You can't understand that, retard? Fucking dumb cunt. Anyway, push against anything. Regardless, so he had that's his secondary argument. The idea that you have to have something to push against. Not true. Regardless, tons are tons, asshole. once you've given them, once you've expanded them from here to out here, that means all of this movement, distance, has to be accounted for as a change in the environment. And if you have a material bit that feels that stuff, it doesn't need to be pushing against something. That stuff, like a photon, the photons from the sun create 1,000 watts of energy per meter on the surface of the earth. They're not pushing against the sun to do it, idiot. They're just expanding out of the sun. Expansion. Alright, let's see. Regardless, if something is burning and exhausting out the end of a nozzle, ability to push against anything. Regardless if something is burning and exhausting out the end of a nozzle. So again, the rocket loses the ability to push against something, regardless of the fact that it's coming out of a nozzle as force in one direction, which obviously has to have the reciprocal force in the other direction. That's a Newton's law, idiot. Rockets take an immediate parabola because every meter they climb, the atmosphere thins out. That's irrelevant. And so you think they don't take oxidants with them. You don't understand that they have giant oxygen tank with the hydrogen. You don't understand that that's how the rocket works. It brings its own oxygen. Dumbass. And the atmosphere thins out. And no different than releasing an inflated ball from the bottom of the liquid ocean. The rocket will come bobbing to the thermal density. Utter, irrefutable, undeniable, go fuck. I don't know how this guy could be this fucking stupid. Yourself fact. No, it isn't. No outer space travel. So this guy thinks the whole space program was a fraud. What does that mean for your delusion? I don't know what it means, but it means you can't be perceived as a functioning human being. You can only be perceived as somebody profoundly mentally broken. According to Newton, every action produces an equal and opposite reaction. Do you disagree? Imbalance is imbalance. Yeah, that's right. So then Superior Mind says, you've been fooled if you believe that. As James pointed out, when a system accelerates mass in one direction, the accelerated mass will cause a force of equal magnitude but opposite direction on the system. Well, I don't know if it's really creating a force. I'm just saying, I would argue that the mechanism that releases things from the burdens of wasted time. So you could argue that in matter, everything's wasting its time, right? I mean, it's going like back and forth. And when you release it, you're like, now it's doing the distance in one direction. And so now its mass or its significance is being realized because now it's not undoing it all the time. I mean, that's sort of what like I said, that's the trick of energy. Energy is kind of an illusion. There's no such thing. It's just imbalances. Anyway. Thrusts equals mass, flow, exhausts. Well, I think you have to explain more completely that any expansion has to be contained. So even if it's in one direction, if you draw the container properly, you'll see the opposite reaction. You can't make something go this way if you didn't consume something going some other way. That's the way to say it. You changed something. Alright, anyway. I have 3 words for you. Flying spaghetti monster. I don't know if that's, I mean, he's sicker than religious. But propellers do work in space, I'm sure. So that's what Gus Fling said. I don't know if that's very constructive. By the way, the reason your car goes is because it's pushing the Earth backward, but your mass is so much smaller you can't see the Earth move. Well, technically, I mean, I just don't. Why are you making the comparison? Because technically, that's exactly what is happening. Okay, a piece of the Earth is the Earth is having to absorb that force in that direction, in the opposite direction. Just like our bodies are bouncing on the surface of the Earth right now. Gravity's accelerating us. We truly do get accelerated. The force of that acceleration impacts the Earth. It creates pressure. That pressure goes into the Earth. Eventually has to be reflected back out, pushing us back off the Earth, so to speak. So that argument isn't helpful at all. Anyway, I'll just pretend he didn't say that. Earth's backwards, so your mass is smaller. Can't you see the Earth move? Same principle working in a rocket. The jet fuel burns and releases molecules. It doesn't release molecules. Obviously, it changes the separation between the molecules, and this propels the rocket forward. It takes compressed molecules and releases them into expansion, and the expansion is got to be dealt with. That's right, the rocket has the funnel. Anyway, man, no, right, Gus Fang, so this is the idiot. The accelerating molecules need a resistance to create a back pressure and drag. Whatever, no. The velocity density of the atmospheric ocean, whatever that is, the rocket is swimming in. No, rockets aren't swimming. Determines the forward motion. I love you, fuck stick moronic trolls. I destroy you every day. I'll destroy you every day. You're not going to do it with that idiotic argument. Rockets aren't swimming, idiot. Invoking Poe's law, by the way. I don't even know what that means. So that was Jody Scott. Anyway, Hitman, if anyone hears a troll, it's you, obviously. Well, you're both assholes. And I'd say he's retarded and you're evil. Blitzman Fever. It's not about having intellectual superiority. It's about being more accurate with ideas than wrong about them. Yeah, or, sorry, you're an idiot. Evidence and use of the secret method. Why would I use a 2,000-year-old method, idiot? Are fundamental to easy shaming your kind. Well, you didn't do any of that. Let me reiterate. Now, there's no point in reiterating because you just point out that all you're doing is brain farting. A vertically climbing rocket, space doesn't really worry about vertical anymore, loses the ability to push against anything, regardless if something is burning and exhausting out the end. So he's just going to say exactly the same thing. Keep making a stupid argument. Rockets take an immediate parabola because he really is going to say the same thing. And no different than releasing an inflated ball. And you're an idiot. Rockets parabola because they create less thrust as they get as they start going higher and further. Idiot. It's harder to add more speed. Anyway, utter irrefutable. You don't like that whatever the fat camera guy. Undeniable. Go fuck yourself. Fact. No outer space travel. What does that mean to your delusion? So he said exactly the same thing again. He repeats exactly the same thing. That's really crazy. Alright, well anyway, so the next comment appears to be Hoffaday's PET scanners, and this, his inability to phrase an argument very well, so, I didn't get what he was saying. But he claims lots. Well, anyway, we'll get into the neutrino argument the next time. But I mean, it's a lot more complicated than this simple thing. Like, oh yeah, they proved they exist. They proved something exists. And whether it qualifies as an antiparticle, whether it qualifies as something that actually exists, like one for one, like for every electron, there's a neutrino, a positron floating around somewhere. It's a little antiparticle positron. And it's just hiding in these great locations. The positron is hiding, like right next to the proton, maybe. The thing it has an equal charge of the same charge as. Yeah, that doesn't sound very likely, does it? No, it doesn't. Anyway, it's a lot more complicated. I don't know whether it's worth getting into, because we're just going to get into arguments about what's a cause and what's an effect. It's back to the photon and the electron argument. They're going to say the photon does this and the photon does that, when I'm going to say no. The photon hits an electron, the electron does something, and then the photon's readmitted in a new form. And I think the positron is the same sort of phenomenon. But anyway, positron, as Wojciech says it. But anyway, I'm tired, and that's probably enough for now. So I'll be back, and we'll see if, like I said, I'll have to decide whether I want to get into this whole. It was just the secondary element of the video, was just pointing out that I think these are other areas where they were very fast to draw conclusions based on very little evidence. Anyway, so till next time and such. So forth and whatnot.